I still smell the scalding even now. Hot iron against flesh, the steam rising with the screams. It clung to the cane fields like a second fog. Men speak of hell, of fire beneath the earth. But I tell you, hell was here, on the mountain slopes of Tortola, under the hand of Arthur Hodge. They called it a plantation, but it was no farm. It was a slaughter ground, a place where breath itself was borrowed, and mercy never came. I watched children dropped into boiling cauldrons of sugar, their cries swallowed by the hiss of cane juice turned to syrup. I saw men whipped until their spines lay bare, women branded until their skin bubbled like meat. All this done not in secret, but in daylight, before God and the mountain winds. If you think I exaggerate, then listen. For I was there, and my tongue will not soften the truth. What I carry is heavier than chains, the memory of the death farm. My name I will not give you, for names were taken from us long ago. But know this. I was born free across the sea, torn from my mother's arms, and dragged into the Atlantic dark. The ocean took much of me, but it did not take my memory. And so I speak, as one voice among millions silenced, to leave behind the story they tried to bury. It was the year 1810 when the island of Tortola held my body, though my spirit roamed each night back across the waves. I labored under Arthur William Hodge, a man of wealth and cruelty, who sat at fine tables while we bent beneath the lash. He was not the first to treat us as beasts, but he was the boldest in his devilry. He killed us for sport, for hunger, for nothing at all. If you're hearing this, I need you to listen to the end. Speak it aloud, share it, write it, so that silence does not swallow us again. Too long, the cries of my people were carried only by the wind. Let them be carried now by your tongue, your heart, your hands. If this reaches you, speak on it, so the soil does not keep our blood unmarked. They rang the horn before the sun, always before the sun. A hollow groan from a battered conch shell blown by old Jacob, who had no toes left and walked like wind through tall grass. That sound pulled us out of sleep like a chain around the ribs. Every morning the same, eyes open, mouth dry, muscles aching from yesterday and dreading today. My shirt was made from sackcloth, stiff with sweat and salt. It scratched my skin raw under the arms. Most days I wrapped rags round my feet, tied with cord from old sugar sacks. Shoes were for the master's dogs, not us. The women wore dresses patched so many times the cloth forgot its first color. We had one set of clothes each, and when they tore, we kept wearing them. Nakedness was no shame here. It was just truth. The smell of the soil stayed in your throat, iron-rich and warm, mixed with cane rot and the sour stink of sweat. We planted and we cut and we bundled, always bending. In the cane fields, your back broke before your spirit did. The sun laid itself heavy on your spine, and the flies swarmed your neck, biting through the cloth. Cane knives dulled fast and blistered the palms. I remember the shape of every callus on my father's hand. We got one biscuit of meal and a bit of salt herring in the morning if it came. At night, maybe yam boiled in muddy water. The cookhouse fire smoked too much, and the meat smelled like it had already died twice. But we ate, slow and quiet, watching for the overseer's shadow to pass. They called us seasoned, those of us who had lasted past the ship and the market. Like meat cured to the land, trained to the whip. The new ones, fresh from Africa, still held fight in their eyes, but most had it beaten out before the month was up. Hodge made sure of that. He believed in starting strong, said a broken spirit worked longer. I was 12 when I watched my sister sold to a planter bound for Antigua. She had long fingers and used to twist my hair at night. I remember her face, not her voice. That day they took her, my mother tore at her own clothes until she stood bare, mouth open but no sound came out. The buyer didn't look her way once. There were laws, written ones, though none of them were for us. We knew partus sequitur ventrum before we knew what it meant. A child born to a slave woman was a slave, no matter the father, and many fathers wore boots. White men passed laws by candlelight, but we lived them in silence. Sunday came like a hush. That's when we went into the woods, deeper than the cane, to pray. We weren't allowed, but they pretended not to see. We gathered under the gum trees, no shoes, heads bowed, hearts thundering. One man would sing, slow and low, and the others would follow. No drums, no claps. Just feet pressed to the earth. Our only drum. That's where we said our names. The real ones. The ones the ships tried to drown. My mother sang to me in whispers when I couldn't sleep. She'd hum something, from far across the ocean, a sound I never found words for. She used to say, "If they take your name, child, keep your song. No one can chain that." But songs couldn't stop the whip. We lived afraid. That was the normal. Not just afraid of pain, but of loss. Of waking and finding someone gone, sold, dead, disappeared. You didn't get to say goodbye. You didn't cry out. You worked. You endured. You held your breath and hoped the lash passed over you that day. There were no safe days on Hodge's land. Only days you were chosen, and days you were not, and no one stayed unchosen forever. I don't remember the name of my village no more, but I remember the trees, the way the wind rattled them at night like bones in a gourd. I remember the way my mother's arms wrapped round me, the dust clinging to my ankles as we fetched water. I was 11 when they came. The white men didn't come first, it was the others, darker like us but with muskets and chains. They came with fire and rope, and I never saw my father again after that. They dragged us through thorns and bush to the coast, where the air changed, salt and decay mixing with sweat. They packed us in a wooden pen, a place they called a factory, though no goods came from it. Only people, like goods waiting to be weighed and marked. The barracoon stank of waste and old blood. The guards whipped anyone who made a sound. We were herded like cattle, heads shaved, wrists roped. At night I listened for my brother's breath. By morning, he was gone. When they marched us to the shore, the ship looked like a monster with wooden ribs. The slaver's name was carved on the side, Maria. They crammed us below deck, row on row, shackled wrist to ankle. The heat there wasn't like sun heat. It was fever heat, thick and unmoving. Bodies steamed. Men vomited and lay in it. Rats chewed the weak. The women were dragged above some nights and returned crying. They forced us to dance, called it exercise, chains rattling while they flogged anyone too weak to rise. We lost count of days. We lost the stars. We lost language. I heard a woman pray once, in a tongue I didn't know, and then she went quiet. They threw her over the side. No one cried. You learn to cry on the inside. When we reached land again, I thought maybe we'd find mercy. We didn't. Tortola looked green, but it held no kindness. They sold me on a platform under a silk canopy. Arthur William Hodge bought me with 2 others, a man missing an ear and a girl with burns across her arm. The auctioneer joked that we'd fetch less if we didn't have all our parts. Hodge laughed. That laugh. I'd come to dread it more than the whip. He took us to the hills. His house sat high, grand and painted white. But behind it, rows and rows of cane, sharp and endless, stretched down the slope. He called it Bellevue Estate, but we called it the Death Farm. We weren't allowed to speak to each other much. Any gathering of more than 3, they broke up. But we found ways. We passed messages while working. We sang coded songs. Some elders carved letters into bark, taught others behind the curing shed. I learned A in secret from old Essie, who once served in the house. She said knowing words made you dangerous. I only learned half the alphabet before she was whipped until she lost her voice. Days started before dawn, ended past dark. We worked 12, 13 hours, bending into the stalks. The cane knives tore us as much as they did the crop. My hands were always blooded, the salt from my sweat stinging the cuts. The overseer rode a horse high and clean. His whip was named Mercy, though he never showed any. When someone slowed, they were whipped. When someone spoke back, they were caged. Hodge liked iron. He had a thing for fire, too. He branded us, not just once, but every time someone changed task or was punished. He liked the smell of burning skin, said it reminded the others to stay in line. I remember him smiling as he pressed the iron into a boy's thigh, said he was fixing a disobedience. There was a pot near the boiling house. They used it for cane syrup. But sometimes when Hodge was drunk, or angry, or just bored, he'd order someone dipped. Not killed, not all the way, just a leg or an arm or back first. Let the scalding do its work. One girl, barely 10, was held by 2 men while he had her foot lowered in. She screamed like no sound I'd heard before. I don't remember her name. We never saw her again. He killed openly. They said he once forced a man to eat his own flesh. I believed it. Hodge didn't hide his cruelty. He bragged of it. Said no law on earth would touch a man of property. And for a long time, he was right. Families didn't last. My bunkmate, Joseph, had 3 sons. He watched them sold one by one. They say the last time he saw his youngest, he bit through his own lip to keep from screaming. We stitched our kin where we could. I called a woman auntie who was no blood. A boy called me brother, though we shared no mother. We found each other in small ways, in looks, in shared cups, in the last bite of yam. I held love once. Her name was Adia. We met during water hauling, stole moments behind the shed. Her laughter was soft, always quiet like it knew it could be punished. We planned to run. We didn't plan well. They caught us at the river's edge. I was spared, barely. She wasn't. They broke her knees so she could never run again. Then they sold her anyway. Last I heard, she was bound for St. Kitts. Hope came in whispers. Stories of Haiti, of black men ruling themselves, of the French running like whipped dogs. We clung to those stories. We sang them into our songs. Sometimes we heard that a ship had docked with free sailors from England, men who spoke of abolition. Some believed it. Most didn't. You couldn't live on belief here. Then came the day that changed it all. A boy named Prosper, only 16, was flogged until his skin peeled from his spine. His only crime? He dropped a pail. Hodge ordered the flesh cut clean off, said he'd make art of him. That boy died before sunset, and someone talked. Maybe it was one of the freedmen who did business in town. Maybe it was a missionary, passing through. But a letter went out, a trial was called. Not by slaves, by British law. First time I'd seen white men question one of their own. Hodge didn't believe it, laughed through most of it, said no court would hang a gentleman. But the testimony piled up. One woman told of her son's murder. Another man showed scars so deep they looked like carved rivers. And for once, they listened. The day of his hanging, the sky held no sun. They marched him out before the gallows, and he looked smaller somehow. Less a master, more a man. He begged, they say. I wasn't there, but the others told me. Said he wept. Said he prayed. He died with rope on his neck, not gold. But we weren't freed. Not yet. The death farm still stood. The cane still cut our skin. But something shifted in the wind that day. We saw a master fall and the world moved. I held that in my chest like fire. Not freedom, but a spark. Something the sea and the lash hadn't taken. A belief that perhaps, even in this place, justice could breathe, and I have carried it all this time. It was the fire in the boiling house that did it. They said the pipe burst from too much pressure. One minute the workers were stirring cane syrup. The next, the pot hissed and spat molten sugar across the room. A boy named Kojo, just 14, caught the worst of it. His face and chest peeled in seconds, and he staggered out into the open yard, screaming, skin hanging in ribbons. I remember the smell, like meat left too long in smoke. He didn't die right away. He crawled across the ground, clutching at the grass, eyes milky and blistered. Nobody dared move. We knew what Hodge would say. Damaged property. Not worth the doctor. The overseer tried to drag him behind the curing shed. Hide the damage, maybe. But Kojo kept moaning. His breath bubbled slow and wet. And I couldn't bear it. I moved. Just a step. That step cost me everything. I bent beside him and whispered the Lord's Prayer in his ear. His eyes fluttered. I thought maybe he heard me. But behind me, I heard the whistle. Not a shout, just the whistle the overseer gave when he wanted to make an example. They seized me, tied me to the punishment post near the edge of the field. Hodge didn't speak when he arrived. Just stood, arms folded, and nodded once. They brought out the iron collar. It weighed near 20 pounds, rusted and ringed with dull spikes. They locked it round my neck and beat it down tight so it bruised my shoulders. The message was clear. You stop where we say. You move when we say. I wore that collar for, a week. Couldn't sleep without choking on my own breath. But worse was what came after. Kojo died that night, quietly. No burial, just dumped in the cane trash like he was rot. The next morning, Hodge called us all out to the yard, said, "Mercy is for men, and you are not men." Then he had a girl brought forward. Her name was Mimbi. She'd been Kojo's sister. 11 years old, small-boned, always humming something under her breath when she worked. He stood her on a barrel. Said if we loved our kin so much, we could watch them burn. She didn't scream when they tied her, didn't even cry. Just stared forward, silent, and there it was, the choice. The fire hadn't yet been lit. The rope was still dry. I stood not 5 feet from her, collar still around my neck, arms trembling. I knew what I could do. I could charge, run at Hodge, tackle the barrel, grab her and bolt for the cane rows, maybe die before I took 3 steps, maybe get her away, or I could stay still, keep my life, stay breathing. I looked at her and she looked back, and I swear in her eyes I saw it, permission, not forgiveness, but understanding, that if I moved, we both would burn. I didn't run. I didn't save her, and I've lived with that every day since. She didn't scream, not once, only the flames did. Years passed, and the fields kept growing. One harvest bled into the next. Some of us were sold, some died in their rows, some disappeared in the night, and no one spoke their names again. But I remained. I carried the work, the silence, the smoke of that fire in my lungs. The world moved on like it forgot what was buried here. Cane still grows on that mountain. The sugar still flows. They say Arthur William Hodge was the only white man ever hanged in the British colonies for killing a slave, just one, out of how many? And even then it took 100 deaths to make one count. They called it justice. I called it too late. I lived through a time when a man could own your breath, could mark your skin like cattle, could boil your child alive and still walk free. And I lived long enough to see some people pretend it never happened, as if memory were too heavy to carry. But I carry it. I carry them all. Their voices come to me still in the quiet. Kojo, Adia, Mimbi. Not in dreams, in the heat, in the steam, in the hush just before the horn. The ground here remembers what the wind tries to erase.